I'm Grimdork, and today I am talking about my favourite faction of all time in the Warhammer universe, and that is the clowns, the murder clowns, the Harlequins. What can I say? If you don't think they're the best faction in all of Warhammer, then you're wrong. And I know it's just my opinion, and you're entitled to yours, but yours is wrong, and mine is correct. So, I didn't write the rules, that's just the way it is. How can you not love them? They're psychic space ninjas with a sense of humour. So I thought that rather than be completely relevant and talk about worm blades like everybody else, I would instead talk about a compendium team that no one's talking about. So I guess that's what we're doing today. Arguably the strongest kill team in the compendium, maybe tied with Custodes possibly, but I'm not interested in how competitive they are, how strong they are. I want to talk about how fun they are. They're a blast, they're an absolute blast to play. I might be a little bit biased because obviously I'm a massive Harlequin fanboy and my 40k army is Harlequins. But honestly, like all of their shenanigans, all of the cool stuff they can do, like they just make for a really sneaky faction full of shenanigans and fun. And like, who doesn't want to play like that? And you know, the fact that they're also competitive, you know, makes them a great pick. Even if you don't like them, you should learn about them because you will face them at some point, and if you're not prepared, then you will lose. It's as simple as that. So we're going to talk about their pros, we're going to talk about their cons, we're going to talk about what loadouts you should be taking, what missions they favour, what tac ops you should be aiming to take for them, their strats, their equipment, strategies against different matchups. I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can. Now there are a number of other faction focuses on Harlequins for Kill Team. I don't want to cover everything because I don't honestly like. I've played them a lot, and there's some stuff that I don't think you need to really know too much about because you're not really going to use them. In practice, there's just sort of a handful of loadouts and a handful of strats that you're going to be using for them. So I want to focus on those, why they're so great, the sort of things that you should be focusing on if you want to play Harlequins, especially if you're a beginner just coming into it and you want to just separate out the wheat from the chaff and just get on with it. So, Troop Kill Team comprises of 8 models, 5 warriors and 2 gunners and 1 leader. They're all pretty much the same. You know, leader as usual gets an extra wound, gets a slightly better weapon skill. They all get access to the same melee weapons, aside from the leader who gets the chance to take a power weapon. I love power weapons, that lethal 5-up's great, but that being said, the embraces with brutal, I'll get into all of this anyway in greater detail, but they're hard to pass up, to be honest, especially with some of the cool stuff that you can do with them. They all get a shuriken pistol, which is great. Like, it's a fairly decent gun. It's got short range, but you know, it puts out some decent shots. You can do some damage with them. And then you've got 2 gunners that can either take neuro disruptors or fusion pistols, and then the leader can either take a fusion pistol or a neuro disruptor. Now their basic stat line is actually really strong. They are a little bit brittle, so you've got to be careful with them. So generally when I'm looking at a kill team, I like to compare them to assault intercessors. Now, why would I do such a thing, seeing as assault intercessors are pretty much hot garbage in the meta? I think that they're a great baseline, especially if you're learning the game. You know, they're well balanced, they're pretty tough, they've got a good stat line, they're basic, right? They don't have anything particularly special, but I think actually using them as a baseline helps you to gauge the strengths and weaknesses of each model in your fire teams. So on that basis, Harlequins are pretty strong. You know, they are like for like basically on their stat line for everything except for their wound count, which you'd expect. The difference being that they get an invulnerable save. Invulnerable saves, for those of you that don't know, means that basically AP or armor penetration is not going to affect you. So, for example, if your opponent shoots at you with a plasma gun, one of the special rules is something called AP1 on the basic stat line. If you're firing on the supercharged profile, then it's AP2. Basically what the AP means is that it's going to take away one or more of your defense dice. So for AP1, that takes away one of your defense dice. For AP2, it takes away two of your defense dice. So, you know, you're getting shot with a plasma gun on supercharge, for example, which is AP2. That means you only get to roll one of your defense dice. So your assault intercessors, for example, have a saving profile of 3+. That means you roll your defense dice, and every time you score 3 or more on each of those dice, you save one of those wounds, right? But again, if you're shot with that plasma on supercharge, you only get to roll one of those dice. So if he hits you 3 times and you manage to save 1, you're still going to be taking 2 wounds, which is going to be quite a lot of damage. If you have an invulnerable save, that means that AP doesn't affect you. You're always going to be rolling your 3 defense dice. Now, Harlequins have a save of 4 up, not 3 up like our assault intercessors, but the fact that AP doesn't affect them means that in some respects they are actually a little bit more durable than the assault intercessors. Obviously it's going to be case by case because there's going to be a lot of stuff shooting at them which doesn't have AP, and you're still only going to be saving on a 4 up, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. And honestly, they've got to have a weakness because otherwise they would be far too good. So the rest of their stat line: movement, 3 circle, obviously as you'd expect from a Harlequin, the movement is going to be good. Kind of feel like they should have more, but it probably would just skew the meta completely. 3 action points. This is actually huge for them, seeing as the other Eldar factions only get 2. That's a big contribution as to how strong they are. So the more models you get on a point, the more action points are on there, easier it is to hold and score those points. So more action points, the better. Obviously, you know, it gives you more options in terms of what your activations are going to be doing. It gives you the option of shoot, charge, fight, so you can do an extra bit of damage if you're in close enough, because they're obviously all very short range on their weapons. So yeah, one of the biggest contributors to them being one of the top tier factions, despite the fact that they're only Compendium. Group activation 1, no. 3 defense dice. Now save is at 6 up, but as I said before, they've got an invulnerable save, so always saving on a 4 up, and 8 wounds with the leader having 9, which is pretty brittle. But they do have access to some cool strats that can soften the blow a little bit, which we'll get to. Now, your kill team will include 5 warrior operatives, your basic troops. There you go, they'll look something like that. So shuriken pistols. I've kitted out all of mine with embraces. I don't know why you wouldn't. I don't rate the kisses. Some people like using them. I don't rate them. The caresses, like, why would you ever take the caresses? The blades are actually interesting because you've got the reroll from balanced. But I just feel that brutal over balanced just gives you a little bit more punch. So brutal basically means that none of their attacks can be parried other than with critical hits. You know, I find in practice that yeah, they just tend to do a lot more. So that's what I would recommend. Keep them more simple and just stick them on the whole squad. So shuriken pistol, again, going back to that comparison of the assault intercessor, it's pretty much the same stat line. 4 shots, hitting on 3s, does 3 damage on a normal hit, does 4 damage on a critical hit, but you have some special rules. Does only have a 6-inch range, but the flip side of that is that it has the rending rule, which is actually really great. So if you roll a critical hit from one of those shots, you can turn one of your normal hits into another critical hit. It's great. It's pretty great. Really helps out with those 8 wound models. Take care of Battle Sisters and Zangors and Demonettes and stuff like that. It just can turn the tide. So yeah, actually surprisingly good. Now, using 3/4 damage as a baseline, all of their melee options are actually really good. The difference really comes in the special rules. So your warriors, just the same as in 40k, can either take a sword, a caress, an embrace, or a kiss. I know, so sensual. They all get 5 attacks, which is great. You know, the standard generally being 4. Now, going through the 2 that I generally don't take, so what I consider the bottom tier of these, actually all pretty good weapons, is the caress. The caress does the most consistent damage with 5 on a normal hit and 6 on a critical hit, but it doesn't have any special rules. But this is the key part. It only hits on a 4. Now, I don't really know what James was getting at with this, to be honest. If it had a different special rule, if it did mortal wounds, or if it was balanced, or gave you some sort of re-roll, I would understand 4 up. But it doesn't. So I just don't think, like, you know, having a 50-50 chance on those, you know, you're going to be hitting twice or 3 times if you're lucky, and it's not enough. Like, when your opponent gets the chance to hit back, it doesn't take a lot until you're dead. So you want to get the chance of killing as quickly as possible. Now the next one on the ladder, I think, is the Harlequins Kiss. I don't rate this at all. Some people really like it. Again, you get your 5 attacks. This time you're hitting on 3s, which again, it's great. It has the potential to one-shot your guardsmen and your poxwalkers and stuff like that, with 7 on a critical hit. But your normal damage is only 3, which means you need 3 hits to go through to equal that same damage, like, you know, take a low wound model off the board. Now let me remind you that the Harlequins worship the laughing god, and Kegarak likes nothing more than to fuck with your critical hits. So I don't know about you, but I can absolutely rely on completely tanking it with the Kiss. So I just don't bother. Now, blades. Other than the fact that I actually think blades look cool as hell on the models, they're really good. Like, they're great compared to a lot of the other melee weapons that are in the game. Still get your 5 attacks, still hitting on 3s. This time it's 4 and 5 damage, which is much more acceptable. Again, you know, you're taking low wound models off the boards with 2 hits, which is fantastic. And taking some more elite models out with 2 crits, which is perfectly feasible. Again, if Kegarak is not laughing, or maybe if he is laughing. But the big one here is that it gets the balanced rule. And balanced gives you that sweet reroll. Just basically means that you can reroll one of your attack dice. Generally speaking, on 5 attacks on a 3 up, you will be missing at least 1. So that just gives you that extra little bit of consistency, which can obviously be completely key. But my pick is the Embrace, and I actually love this for more than just the reasons I'll say here for Kill Team. I actually use Embraces a lot in 40k, and it's not the most popular pick, but I love them. They also look really cool, I think. So Embraces, again, you've got your 5 attacks, you've got your 3 up hits. It, again, same as the blade, is doing 4 damage on a normal hit, 5 damage on a critical hit, but this time it has the brutal special rule. Now, if you're new to the game, the close combat part of this game is actually quite complicated. So you might not understand what I'm getting at here, but basically what brutal means is that your opponent can only parry your hits with critical hits, which means basically he is forced to take this damage. So as long as you can survive, then you're going to be killing most things. With a fairly decent roll, you're going to be killing most things in the game, which is what you want with models that are as brittle as the Harlequins are. And combined with some of the equipment and the strats that you get, man, you can absolutely just blend anything that you touch, which is what you want for a close combat faction, because these guys need to get in close before they can do any damage. So on top of your 5 warriors, you're also going to have a couple of gunners, which are going to look something like this sexy lady. Now from a melee point of view, they're exactly the same as your warriors, the same stat line. The only difference is you're giving away a shuriken pistol for either a neuro disruptor or a fusion pistol. Now, fusion pistols in this game are brutally powerful. The problem is that you need to get really, really close to use them. So they've only got a 3-inch range. Now you are already, with the rest of your models, having to get within 6 inches if you want to shoot. 3 inch, I mean, so it doesn't, on one side of the coin, it doesn't take much more movement to get you into range to do a lot more damage, potentially. But the Neuro Disruptors are good. The main benefit over your Shuriken pistol is it has the AP1 special rule, which is what we spoke about before. So it's going to take away one of your opponent's save dice. Excellent, excellent ability. AP is massive in Kill Team. It also does 1 extra damage over the Shuriken pistol, so it's doing 4 wounds on a normal hit and 5 wounds on a critical hit. But the key, I find, is that it also has the stun rule on a crit. And this can be absolutely game-winning stuff against certain factions. So what the stun rule does, basically, is make whatever you're shooting at act as if it's injured. So it's going to take away movement, it's going to take away action points, it's going to mess with their weapon and ballistic skill. So think about that from a strategic point of view, right? You've got one of your gunners and you want to take an objective off your opponent. Now a lot of these factions only have 2 APL. Now if you don't know, APL is how you take objectives in Kill Team. You want to have more action points on an objective than your opponent does. So it's not just about model count like it is in 40k. So if your model has 3 action points and your opponent's model has 2 action points, you hold that objective. So if your opponent has 2 models on an objective, each with 2 APL, then that usually means that you're going to have to risk 2 of your models in order to take the objective from them. Now if you can stun one of those models, it's going to take their APL down to 1. Which means that you have then matched their action points. You have 3 and they have 3. So that's then going to be contested, and at very least you're going to have taken it away from your opponent. If you then fight the other model and injure it, it's going to take that model down to 1 action point, which means they're going to have to bring in another model in order to take that point back from you, even though you just have 1 model on it. It sounds great. It doesn't come up all that often, mostly because the Neuro Disruptor is great and it will, generally speaking, finish off a model like that. But it's worthwhile thinking about from a strategic point of view because it gives you options. Now one caveat to this is that if you are going to go up against Talons of the Emperor, Field and Custodian Guard, then don't take Neuro Disruptors because they are going to be immune to the stun roll. So you might as well get a bit closer, give them fusion pistols and take the AP2. On that note, fusion pistol is the other option for them. As I said, I don't generally take them. I usually take Neuro Disruptors because I think they just have a little bit more feasibility and a little bit more utility than a fusion pistol does. But I'll go through the stats here so you've got a comparison. To get those same 4 shots, hitting on 3s again. Now when I was learning this game, this next stat threw me right off because it says that you are going to do 5 damage on a normal hit. Excellent. But that you're only going to do 3 wounds on a critical hit. Seems a bit odd, but the special rule on a critical hit is that it does 3 mortal wounds. So that means that whether or not they save that shot, they are going to take 3 wounds from that, and that is excellent. So on an unsaved roll, they're going to take 6 damage. It also has AP2, which is going to take away 2 of your opponent's dice. So the chances of doing big damage with this are very likely. The only downside is that shorter range. You've got to get within 3 inches. And finally you have your leader, which most people will set up as a little troop master. Now, he's pretty much the same as your other guys. Gets the usual leader stuff. So he gets 1 better on his weapon skill and ballistic skill, so he's hitting on 2s. He also gets an option for a power weapon, which is pretty cool. Power weapons get the lethal 5-up special rule, which means that you're critting on a 5 and a 6 rather than just a 6, which is awesome. It also, I believe, does 1 more damage on a crit than the Embrace does. So that's a benefit, especially because you're critting now on 5s. You know, that's excellent. He also gets the same pistol options as your gunners, so he can take a fusion pistol or a neuro disruptor. Generally speaking, I'll take him with a fusion pistol. He's usually a fighty boy, but when it comes up, that fusion pistol can be really good, or if you need that utility, that like really hard hitting gun, you know, he can move across the board fast and he can utilize it. I think 3 is overkill, but having 1 is pretty good. You could also flip it. You could give him the extra range of the neuro disruptor and then give 2 fusion pistols to the gunners. That's actually a way that I've never fielded them, but I probably will, thinking about that. I think that might be quite a cool way of doing it, but as I said, I usually take a fusion pistol on him, and he's always such an MVP. He's just so good, so consistent, and when you have a model that good, you generally don't have to put equipment on them, which is quite nice. You can save your equipment for some of the others, which in Harlequins is necessary, really, because every piece of equipment that they have is 3 equipment points. So it means you can only give them to 3 of your operatives. So by just making your leader really good and negating the necessity to have any equipment on him, you can free it up to do some cool shenanigans on one of your weaker models. So moving on to the equipment, yeah, as I said, it's kind of annoying. It's the one really kind of irritating thing about this team, is that every piece of their equipment is 3 equipment points, which sucks, because you get 10 equipment points to play with, and you can never make up that last one. So I hate that, but you know, it is what it is, and their equipment is really good, so I probably shouldn't be moaning. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into all of these equipment options. Like I said, the information is out there for you to look at. It's all really cool, but I am just going to talk about the things that I tend to take, and why. There's basically only one thing that I take, mostly for simplicity because I'm lazy, but it's so hard to pass up. But first I will talk about one of the other things that I tend to take because it can be really helpful, and that is the pure Psycho Crystals. So if you're fielding 2 Neuro Disruptors, then you can equip both of those boys with pure Psycho Crystals, which basically gives them the lethal 5-up rule, which again is great because then you're critting on 5s and 6s. The extra chance to do that little bit of extra damage is always really good. It's okay. It's good, but I've changed what I typically do with equipment. When I first started playing Kill Team, I felt like I needed to boost my kind of special characters to make them better. But actually, I find now you're better off putting the equipment on the cheaper models and making them better, because your gunners and your troop master or leader, they're already excellent models that can take on basically anything in the game. So what I now find myself doing is equipping 3 of my lesser warrior models with accelerated monofilament wire. This is excellent. It's come in so clutch in so many of my games that I can't imagine a time when I'm not going to take it. So not only does it give the lethal 5-up rule to an Embrace model, again, excellent, don't need to talk about that anymore, gives you crits on 5s and 6s rather than 6s, but it also gives you the Reap 1 special rule, which basically means on a critical hit it does a mortal wound. So that is, regardless of whether they save that, that 1 wound is going through, which can be so clutch if you've got a model that you didn't manage to kill, and you managed to kind of get into fighting distance, but I know I've had it where my opponent's got really lucky with his rolls. You know, you can potentially be putting 2 or 3 mortal wounds down in a fighting round, which can often be all you need to finish off a model that survived one of the previous rounds of combat. It's so good. It's just so good. And to have 3 models like that on the board, on top of your amazing leader and 2 really great gunners as well, it's it's so strong, and I don't know why you would take anything else, to be perfectly honest, because this I feel is worth the 3 equipment points. The other ones in comparison I just don't feel are. Might be a bit of a hot take, because there are some other really cool things there that you can take. The Death Mask is kind of really quite thematic, but you know, the other thing with the Death Mask is that as your Harlequins, just the same as in 40k, you're really CP dependent. You know, you need those command points to really kind of bring your strengths out. But I just don't think it's worth it. I'd rather have the consistency in combat. Like, again, you don't have a lot of punch in the shooting. Your shooting's good, but it's short range and it doesn't have massive punch. You are a fighting army, you're a melee army. So anything you can do to boost that, just to kind of make sure and have some extra punch, is always going to be good. But that is my pick. The other stuff's cool, but that is just on another level. Strategic Ploys. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, because you want to be able to do all of these, but you just don't have the command points to do them. I'll talk through the strats first, and then I will tell you which ones I like using and in what combination. So, the one that I don't tend to use very often is Rising Crescendo. Now, it is really good. I just don't find myself using it. I don't find it as useful as the other two, and one in particular, which I'm constantly using. Now, if you're a beginner, it's one of those strats that you might read through and think, actually it's not that good, but it is extremely strategic. So basically what it allows you to do is to dash or charge even if you're in engagement range. So essentially it's like negating the need to fall back, but more than that, it gives you the option to charge from one model to another, which is amazing. It also gives you an extra inch to all of your movement, so that's kind of great thematically, right? Because they're a super mobile faction, and it's nice to be able to kind of do some movement shenanigans. I think they should have more, but it is still really sound. There's another strat. There's a tactical ploy which is excellent, like super thematic. I don't find myself using it very often, but you know, it would be nice to have a bit more. But it has its uses. It's going to be situational, and you're going to have to be conscious of it, because obviously your strategic ploys you need to do at the beginning of the turning point. So you need to be aware of what your models are doing and whether it's going to come in clutch or not. Domino Field. Yeah. This is pretty much the bane of everybody's lives. It's such a strong strat. Basically what Domino Field allows you to do is to never get shot, ever. So I find myself popping this at the beginning of turn 1, right? And I think most Harlequin players are going to be doing the same thing. So basically what it means, you cannot be shot under any circumstances. Even if there is a sniper sat on a vantage point, that model that can normally shoot you even if you've got a conceal order still cannot shoot you. So this forces your opponent to just stage, right? If you're up against a subpar player, they're going to try and do some stuff. They're going to like see whether they can get up the board and charge you and stuff like that, and usually that just brings them up in the open, and then you can just wipe the floor with them on the next turning point. If your opponent's wise about it, they will take that turn to just keep themselves safe, stage, get into the positions that they want to, perhaps score some points. But it's still frustrating, right? Because they'll want to do other stuff and they won't be able to do that other stuff because they can't. Super strong, but generally it's just a turn 1 thing. And it's, again, very thematic. Well, not necessarily thematic, but it does kind of mirror the way you should be playing Harlequins in 40k2, which I think is really cool. You have to play them cagey. You have to keep them safe turn 1 and kind of get prepared to then just table your opponent with just a whirlwind of embraces, kisses, and caresses. It's super cool. And again, you really need that survivability because your models are quite brittle. So this kind of gives you that extra little bit of survivability. The third and final strategic ploy open to you is Prismatic Blur. Now, Prismatic Blur might well be, in my opinion, the best strat in the game. With the caveat that it's so strong because of the way Harlequins are. Again, being not very survivable and very, very hard hitting. So I am popping this basically every turn other than turn 1. I'm using my command point and I'm just doing this. Just in case, basically. Now the one thing you've got to bear in mind, and this has caught me out on a couple of occasions, much to the dismay of my opponent, is that it only activates, if you will, once you have activated a model. So if you do a move or a dash or a charge or whatever, then you get access to this strat. So the effects of Prismatic Blur are defensive, and they are twofold. There is a shooting element and a fighting element. So for the shooting element, when your opponent shoots you, it basically means that you can re-roll one of your defense dice, which is excellent. It's basically a free command re-roll on everyone in your faction that's activated. It makes them infinitely more survivable in the shooting. But the clutch bit is in the fighting. And this is really cool because it's very much unique to them. It's not a feel no pain like a lot of other factions get. It's not an invulnerable save. It's its own thing, all of their own, and I love that. So when your opponent is resolving their hits in melee, when they put forward a dice to inflict damage, you get to roll a dice. On a 4, 5 or 6, it forces that dice to become a parry rather than a hit. This has come in clutch on so many occasions for me, and it can completely turn the tide of the melee. Especially if you're combining this with some of the stuff that you can get from other strats or from the accelerated monofilament wire. It's so strong that you kind of just want to be popping it every turn just in case, because you need all the survivability you can get. So overall, strategic ploys, all excellent. Domino Field and Prismatic Blur are the ones that you're really going to be using a lot of. Tactical ploys. So where strategic ploys you are popping at the beginning of the turning point. Strategic ploys you are doing them in combat, in shooting, like in the firefight phase. This is when you're popping them when they come up, so they're kind of situational. Again, all of the Harlequins tactical ploys are excellent and very thematic, which I really, really love. So the first one, and probably the one that I use more than any of the others, is Murderous Entrance. Such a cool name as well. So this is an offensive strat, but it's also defensive in a way, right? Essentially what Murderous Entrance lets you do is, while you're resolving your dice in the fight phase, if you manage to get a critical hit, you can put that critical damage through and you immediately get to choose another one of your dice, a critical or a normal hit, and put that damage through as well. So it's defensive in that if you've got a kind of lowish wound model that you're going into, it gives you the chance to kill it off outright without taking any damage, which is really quite crucial for Harlequins, again being all squishy. But it's also so aggressive, right? Even if you're going up against a 19 wound Custodes leader, right, you've got the potential there to put down 12 damage before they've managed to do anything to you. More than that, if you've got, again, the monofilament wire and you're doing mortal wounds as well, it's so good. And again, you know, if you've got the lethal 5-up rule, then you're increasing the chances that you're going to be able to use it. Again, one of those just super clutch strats that can help turn the tide of the battle. The Curtain Falls. Another, oh god, all the names are so dope. Another super thematic, super cool, fluffy strat. And it's kind of like a get out of jail free card, or like a parachute basically. So what this allows you to do is, once you've rolled your attack dice in the fight phase, once you've put some damage through, you can just escape. You can just kind of like, bosh, and run away. It's amazing. Again, gives you that little extra bit of survivability, and if you roll 1 critical hit and 4 ones and miss everything, like that's like, it's so much better than having a command reroll, because again it negates the chance of you taking damage. You can just fall straight back from combat, right? And then you're safe, right? You can hide behind a rock or whatever and just stay out of the way, and it just helps you to survive that little bit longer. It's amazing. I just wish that we had more CP to play with, because I wish I could pop these all the time. It's just so cool. It's not actually the strongest strat, but it's just really cool, and it's annoying, and I like that it's really annoying. It's fun to annoy your friends every now and then. Its only weakness is that you need to have an APL handy to do it. So it allows you to fall back from combat, but only if you still have an action point remaining. So if you think you're going to be using it, then don't shoot first, right? Which a lot of the time you're not going to be, because you're going to be out of range, but you know, make sure you've got that action point remaining to allow you to fall back should you want to use this strat. Hero's Path. The most fluffy Harlequins strat. It's amazing. You just pick up a model and you pop it anywhere you like. It uses up all of your action points, and you have to end more than 6 inches, I believe, away from any of your opponent's models. But as long as they're not blocking you out too much, then yeah, you just pick it up, pop it where you need to be. So it's excellent for staging someone. It's the one I use the least. I would love to use it more, but again, CP heavy faction, and you kind of need to save them. It does come in quite clutch late game sometimes, so if you need to take an objective towards the end of the game that's wide open, just pick him up, pop him down, and job's good. And as long as you don't have to, you know, perform an action on it or whatever, it's great, it's excellent. And that covers all of the strats.